Welcome back to Liberty, everybody. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Liberator Assault Rifle. This is the very first gun that you get access to in Helldivers, since it is your starting weapon, which means that you don't have to pay for it, which is awesome. For the stats of the Liberator, this one does 55 damage per shot, which is fairly decent. That's not one of the highest amounts of damage, but it's not one of the lowest either in the game. This has a magazine of 45, which makes it so this doesn't go through ammo super fast. You can usually kill quite a few bugs or quite a few bots with this before you need to reload it. The recoil on this weapon is extremely low, so that's really good. It also makes it pretty good to be using this at very long range, and the scope on this helps that too, since you can adjust that. This has a rate of fire of 640, which is fairly high, and with the low recoil, it actually makes it pretty easy to use this, again, at very long range, which is awesome. The scope can be adjusted. There's actually a couple things that can be adjusted about this. The scope is one of them. You can adjust this to 25 meters, 50 meters, or 100 meters. You can potentially use this out even further than 100 meters, since it is accurate enough, but 100 meters seems perfectly fine to me. That's probably the maximum range that you're going to be using this weapon at. It's not really meant to be used as like a sniper rifle or a DMR. It's just to be used as an assault rifle, so a lot of the time you're going to be using this at close and medium range. It is already set to automatic fire, which is generally the mode I keep it on, but you can switch this to semi-auto or burst fire. Semi-auto, you fire one round at a time, which can make it so those long-range shots are a bit more accurate, so it could even be better at even longer ranges, but the damage drop-off will affect it then, and usually I'm not using it at super long range. Burst fire is just kind of awkward, and I don't know why you would use it over full auto in really any situation. I guess, again, if you're going for very long range, but even then, I would still probably keep it on semi-auto or full auto just so I could kind of tap fire this. The Liberator also has light armor penetration, which is fine. That covers quite a few enemies. That does make it so you are going to have to go for weak spots on certain enemy types, but we'll talk about that when we do get to the enemy types. For the pros of the Liberator Assault Rifle, this one does actually have pretty good damage per second. You can kill things pretty fast with this, and since Helldiver difficulty doesn't really scale like other games' difficulty, it doesn't suddenly like drop in overall damage once you scale up the difficulty. There's just more enemies to kill. So a weapon like this that can kill fairly fast still actually has a decent place even on the higher difficulties. This also has really low recoil, so it's really easy to be using this at close and medium range. It also has a very fast transition time, so moving from target to target is really easy. The Liberator feels great for that. There isn't a whole lot of primary weapons that really have a slow travel time on them, but there is a couple, and you do feel that, especially over a weapon like this that just doesn't have much. And the other major pro to this is that it's free. You get it right away, so there's no investment whatsoever. For the cons of this weapon, there are a few. This one can run into ammo issues, which is usually my major problem with the Liberator, and that's just because on like higher difficulties there's usually a lot more bugs and a lot more bots that spawn, and you just need more bullets overall. This sometimes isn't too big of an issue since the Liberator does hold 7 mags in total, which makes it so you do have a lot of bullets, and whenever you do resupply these, whether it be off of the boxes that you find around the map or from a resupply, you do at least get a lot of rounds back from that, so that can be good, and if you're picking up rounds and moving around fast enough, then ammo generally isn't an issue with most weapons. The other kind of con to this is that it only does have light armor penetration, which makes it so certain enemy types can be more difficult to deal with. Anything that has medium armor or heavy armor, the Liberator Assault Rifle can struggle with. There are some enemies that you can still fight off fairly well, but it does make it so that it's less forgiving than it otherwise would be. Basically, any of the medium bugs and any of the medium bots can shrug off the Liberator to some extent. For the different enemy types, this one does do pretty well against bugs. It can kill any of the small bugs and small bots very fast, and it's very forgiving because of how accurate it is and how quickly you can spray enemies down. So at close and medium range and even out to long range, bugs and bots, at least the small ones, don't really stand a chance against the Liberator, which makes it fantastic for the lower difficulties when that's the only thing that you're fighting. Once you get to the medium bugs and bots, that's when this starts to kind of run into trouble, because like the bug defenders, you kind of have to go around the back of them or shoot underneath them, hit them in the limbs, and it doesn't kill them super fast. Warriors you can still kill fairly fast because you can rip their head off pretty quick. The Brood Commanders you can rip their head off too without using an entire magazine. It won't be really fast, and they can still attack you afterwards, so you will want to kill them at a distance so that they can't just kind of keep mauling you. Hunters you can actually kill really quick, which is good. Stalkers you don't kill incredibly fast, but you can kill them reasonably quick. Same thing goes with Shriekers. For the Shriekers, this one's actually pretty good against, since they're a flying enemy, and this one has a big enough magazine and sprays fast enough to kill them fairly fast, so that's good. Against the bigger bugs like Chargers, the Liberator just really isn't that good. You can keep shooting them in the back and you'll kill them eventually, but it's it's going to take quite a while. It's not really one of the best primaries for this, not really the best weapon for it. You can make up for that with like your special weapon though, or your secondary weapon. Titans, this one is just really bad to be using against. You can shoot them in the belly, and you can break their belly with this, but it's going to take a lot of ammo to go through and do it. And I just wouldn't really recommend you use it for Titans. You want to be using a special weapon to fight Titans. You want to be using like your EATs, your recoilless rifle, or something like that to knock them out, or your other stratagems like your rail cannon, your precision strike, whatever it might be. That was going to be a much better thing. For the bots, against medium bots, this one can struggle. If you hit them in the head, you can actually kill them really fast, which is kind of surprising. You can kill all the Devastators really quick with this. You can kill Striders so long as you shoot the robot controlling them out of it. Other than that, you're not going to be able to break their legs, or at least I never have tried that. I guess maybe you could if you shoot them enough, but it's going to take way more ammo than it's worth. Just circling around them and spraying them is going to be a lot better. Against Hulks and against tanks, this one isn't really going to be a good option either. If you hit them in the weak spot in their back, you could still kill them with the Liberator, but it's not going to be super quick, and you're not going to be taking out any of like the gunships with this because this doesn't have heavy armor penetration on it. That's, again, better left up to stratagems and left up to the special weapons. As for a loadout that I'd recommend, like primary, secondary, and special weapon, for the Liberator, I'm going to recommend something that is kind of low level that you can get pretty early on. So the Liberator as your primary weapon, because that's the weapon that we're talking about, so that would make the most sense. Then for a secondary, I like the Redeemer with this. The Redeemer is probably the best secondary at the moment, where it's kind of just the Liberator, but shoots a little bit faster and holds less rounds overall. At least you get smaller magazine. That one can be really good, and it pairs really well with this. Spray down enemies. Once you run out of bullets with your assault rifle, switch to your submachine gun, spray down the other enemies, switch back and forth. It can work quite well, and it's really good for killing off all the small enemies. It's okay for killing off medium enemies as well. You could go with a grenade pistol as a secondary option. Grenade pistol plus this actually feels really good. That will probably remain the case until eventually they add an assault rifle with a grenade launcher secondary already attached to it, assuming that they do that. In which case, then I feel like that weapon would just kind of overtake this. But for right now, assault rifle plus grenade pistol is actually really good, and then you can collapse tunnels with the grenade pistol too. And then the regular pistol is actually pretty good with the Liberator too. Even though that's a starting pistol, it is completely free. So even that can work pretty well. Again, kind of use it the same way you would with the submachine gun. I think the submachine gun would be a better upgrade over the pistol, since you can use it basically the same way as the pistol, and it kills things a lot faster because it's full auto. For a special weapon that I'd recommend pairing with this, you could take the MG43, which is your starting weapon stratagem. It makes it so you can kill medium enemies really well, and it's really good for crowds. EATs you can get really early on too, and they make a fantastic addition to this loadout, so that could be another special weapon that you want to take. Those can kill Titans and can kill Chargers really easily, as well as tanks and Hulks as well. Anti-material rifle can be really good if you want to pair it with this too, since that gives you long range and it can take out those big enemies too. It's not going to be as good as like the EATs, but the long range can be really nice, and it can take out Hulks really fast. Or you could go with the autocannon. That's a little bit higher level to level 10, but the autocannon is fantastic for just kind of taking out everything, so that's also pretty nice, even though it does take a little bit more management than something like the anti-material rifle. For a loadout for the stratagems, I'm also going to recommend a low-level loadout that I think is quite good. And first up for stratagems, I would recommend a weapon stratagem, probably going with any of those weapons that we just discussed, so the anti-material rifle, the autocannon, or the MG43. All of these are good for their own reasons. You can pick up certain weapons around the map like the MG43, the Stalwart, and the Flamethrower fairly easy too. So if you find any of those, that's fantastic. But if you want to bring any of these, that can also work really well. Again, anti-material rifle for really long range and high damage, MG43 for just clearing up crowds, or the autocannon for kind of an everything roll that's a little bit more clunky than those other two. And then for a second stratagem, I'd recommend taking the EATs. You can get these very early on, and these ones are fantastic. You can call them in really often. They're great for anti-bug tunnels, they're great for anti-structures, and they're really good for anti-titans, anti-tank weapons. You could alternatively go with backpacks if you want, so a resupply backpack, or I guess a shield backpack, but that's much higher leveled, so resupply backpack would be the earlier one you could get if you want to take that. Then I'd recommend something for taking out big enemies or taking out structures, so I would recommend something like the Orbital Precision Strike. This one you can get right away, and this one can knock out just about everything in the game. It's just it's more difficult to use than other stratagems, but if you do get good at using it, it is probably one of the best stratagems in the entire game. You could also take the 110mm rockets. This one's going to be a bit higher level than the other one, but these ones are great for taking out Chargers, taking out Titans, taking out structures. They're really good for that type of role. Then for the last stratagem, I'd recommend something for more crowd control. So Eagle Airstrike is really good. This can also take out structures, take out bug tunnels, and it's just really good for throwing into crowds. You could go with the cluster bombs as well. These ones are good for taking out crowds. Or you could go with something like the napalm strike, which is also really good for taking out crowds. The napalm strike and the cluster bombs are going to be a little bit less useful against big enemies like chargers and titans, but the eagle airstrike will still be useful against those, so that's kind of the one that I lean towards, but the other two are really good options too. For an overall rating for the Liberty Assault Rifle, on my tier list, I would probably put this into B tier for both bugs and bots. I don't think this is the best primary weapon for taking care of bugs or bots. It's decent at both those jobs. It's not a bad weapon at all, but I do think there's better weapons for both of these. Something like the Punisher, which we've talked about, I think is a better weapon overall than the Liberator, but the Liberator is still very acceptable and a very decent weapon overall. Tell me your thoughts on the Liberator Assault Rifle down in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. Hope you guys have a great rest of your day. I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye!